Back with you, Gallo Radio Show, SuperTalk Mississippi. Streaming at supertalk.fm and SuperTalk TV. Today, January 20th, 2025. It's Inauguration Day. Later today, noon Eastern, 11 o'clock Central Time. Donald Trump will be inaugurated for the second time. This time as the 47th President of the United States of America. To talk about that and a whole lot more, a guy who, if I had the power, not because he's done anything wrong, but if I had the power, I would give a preemptive pardon to Henry Barber, just because he's a good guy. And you never know when you're going to need one of those in your back pocket. We're handing them out left and right, Henry. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Always enjoy the conversations.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to get a pardon. I'm sort of hoping, Richard, that I don't need a pardon. I do want to. Yeah, I do want to start with saying that Paul Gallo is just a fabulous guy, and he helped make SuperTalk what it is, and just my heart is with his family and everybody at SuperTalk and so many Mississippians who love Paul Gallo and who counted on Paul Gallo to bring the news to them each and every day.
It's kind of you to say that, Henry. One thing with Paul, you knew where he stood, right? I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of ambiguity. He had strong opinions, he had strong positions, and he wasn't worried about feathers that might be ruffled along the way. He was rock solid in what he believed.
Well, I will just say, as somebody who had the pleasure of being in the Gallo hot seat from time to time, you better be ready. You better be ready. And if Paul wanted to say something, he was going to say it, and you were going to have a hard time ducking his questions. That's for sure.
No doubt about that.
But
yeah, appreciate you saying those things. I know his family appreciates it, as well as do all of us at SuperTalk Mississippi. I think Paul would have wanted the news to go on today, and this is a day that he would have been very excited about, the inauguration of Donald Trump for the second time. I do want to – I kind of made a joke about it, but I want to ask about the news that we get this morning where Anthony Fauci and members of the January 6th committee, including Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney, General Mark Milley, and others, we think, are receiving these preemptive pardons. Talk to us a little bit about what you read into this.
Well, this is part of the reason that Kamala Harris, Joe Biden were not going to get reelected last year, despite Joe Biden saying recently he would have been reelected had he not been pushed out, as he says, by Nancy Pelosi and whoever else. He's just whining all the way out the door, and it's embarrassing. They are convinced that somehow that Donald Trump is going to come in and go after people because he doesn't like them or whatever. And I will say Trump throws words like retribution around sometimes, but what he has made really clear over the last couple months is his retribution for the people who don't like him is going to be the success of our country. And what Biden is doing with giving pardons to people like Benny Thompson, it's a joke. And it's all the more reason to sweep them out of the White House. Let's move on. Let's get the country back on track where we're thinking about fixing the border, unleashing energy resources in our economy. Let's make our tax cuts permanent. Let's make us stronger abroad, safer at home. These are the things that the American people voted for in November. And it's why Joe Biden, good riddance, go on out and out the door.
There are two things that stand out to me, Henry. One, I think your past tells a lot about what you're going to do in the future. And Donald Trump does not have a history of going after people in terms of retribution through the office of the president. And I don't think that there's any reason to believe that that was going to be his agenda. I think you make a great point. He throws out, big words, and you never know exactly what's going to come out of his mouth. But in terms of what he actually does, once he got into office last time, his focus was on trying to get the things that he wanted to get accomplished. It wasn't on let's go after people who disagree with me.
Yeah, you make a great point, and it's true. Watch what Donald Trump does, not necessarily what he says. Look, Trump says lots of things, and that's how he rolls, and everybody knows it. But watch what he does. There are things that I think he has said that he just says it, and I think sometimes he just likes to see people squirm and react, and but today I think it's really important that we stay on message. Trump stays focused on the things that he's been talking about, like I kind of laid out his priorities: fixing the border and unleashing energy and the economy and getting the tax cuts permanent. And I think President-elect Trump, who will be President Trump in just a few more hours, he sees what's going on with Russia and Ukraine and in the Middle East, and a weakness. Putin looks weak. Iran looks weak. Israel looks strong. I think Trump sees an opportunity abroad, but his focus, I think, certainly initially is going to be on domestic issues. And Stephen Miller, who will be Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, had a call yesterday with senators where he was talking about executive orders and their focus. He talked about energy, particularly encouraging production, particularly offshore drilling, getting rid of the electric car tax credits. He talked about, immigration issues, strengthening the border. He talked about taking back some of the protections that some federal workers will have as opposed to, the sort of career civil service protections that are there, creating some new category of workers called Schedule F. He talked about undoing some of Biden's climate change and DEI and, rolling back this stuff and getting America moving forward in a way that I think will benefit all Americans. And hopefully, some Democrats will see, and even the media will see, that Trump's focused on these things. And that's one of the reasons Wall Street's optimistic, and you see the market going up, because they believe Trump's going to bring less government regulation, more economic growth, more safety for all Americans.
You mentioned Stephen Miller as Deputy Chief of Staff, and he's really the policy guy there and is going to drive a lot of that policy agenda. There's been so much made of some of the nominees for his cabinet positions, whether you're talking about Pete Hegseth or Tulsi Gabbard or Dr. Oz or any of those. I'm curious if you have had any interaction with Susie Wiles. She's going to be the Chief of Staff, and I wonder if she is the one that behind the scenes has the ability to keep Donald Trump on message, to kind of keep him on point in terms of chasing those. Do you have any relationship or interaction with Susie Wiles and kind of her background?
Well, I will say I'm much closer to Chris LaCivita, who was co-manager with Susie. But I'm more so know of Susie and have a lot of mutual friends with her. The great thing about Susie Wiles, and I was very pleased that she got named to be Chief of Staff, because look at her record with the campaign. The Trump campaign in 2024 was just a vastly improved and better run campaign than what they had in 20. Yeah, much more disciplined. And I think Susie Wiles deserves a lot of credit. And so my thinking is that Susie is going to be a pretty good traffic cop in the White House. And as you say, she's not a policy person. She's a political person, and she's going to be able to manage and I think keep the big picture moving forward. And let's stay focused on the big issues that we care about. And people like Stephen Miller, will be focused, more on the details and what they're going to do with these executive orders, today, starting this afternoon and tonight. And I think over the next, 30 to 45 days, I think we'll see a lot of executive orders on energy and environmental and process and DOE, EPA, OMB, lots of executive orders trying to get the country back on track.
We've got more coming up with Henry Barber, GOP strategist, longtime in the political sphere, both here in Mississippi and in Washington, D.C. He was one of the Mississippi delegates to the RNC convention. And we'll talk with him a little bit about the inauguration that is going to happen inside the rotunda of the United States Capitol, noon Eastern, 11 o'clock Central. More coming up with you right after this quick timeout. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Back with you on the Gallo Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Thanks for being with us on this Monday morning, the 20th of January, Inauguration Day. Henry Barber is with us, GOP strategist and longtime guest on the Gallo Radio Show and all of our SuperTalk Mississippi platforms. Henry, there were, there was a time when you heard conspiracy theory, and it meant you were thinking somebody with a tinfoil hat, and there were black helicopters flying around, and John Kennedy, senator from Louisiana, not too terribly long ago, said something about we're going to have to find some new conspiracy theories because all the old ones seem to be turning out to be true. So with that said, I don't know that this is conspiracy theory, but there were a lot of people on Friday and over the weekend when it was announced that the inauguration was being moved from the steps of the Capitol overlooking the Washington Mall into the rotunda, that believed that the weather was a convenient excuse to take this inauguration to a place that was safer inside the Capitol, that could be more controlled and more protective. Do you buy into that at all?
No, I really don't. Look, two people have tried to kill Donald Trump in the last several months. Are the Secret Service folks pleased that he'll be inside the Capitol building? I'm sure they are. But, this was a decision that, President Trump and his team made. And I think, you're talking about today, the wind chill in D.C. in the single digits, windy, really cold. The family of William Henry Harrison, who, was sworn in when it was so cold and he died a month later, our shortest serving president. They understand why, there are a lot of folks that just shouldn't have to stand out in the severe freezing cold, for hours. So I think this wasn't just like, okay, well, Donald Trump doesn't want to be in the cold for, an hour and a half. But it's all the people. And so I think that was part of the concern. I know for folks who are in D.C., I'm in Yazoo City this morning, but for folks who are in D.C., I think initially, it's a disappointment. The biggest event of this busy weekend around the inauguration is the swearing in. It's the big thing. And everybody gets a chance to see and hear from the new president. So that's tough. But, people I've talked to and from what I read, most people are like, look, hey, we're going to have a great time. A lot of people got to see President Trump at a rally he had yesterday at the Capital One Arena where they normally play hockey. Right. And so he's, I think, making an effort, and he'll be going around, to inaugural balls tonight for people to be able to, see him. But it does change the dynamic of sort of the average working class voter who traveled over the country to get there to see Trump sworn in. It's harder for them now to kind of, have that moment where they're standing on the mall and they get to watch Trump get sworn in. So that is a disappointment. And so it is what it is. I mean, it's just really cold, and I think they made a decision because of the cold.
We got a question on the C Spire text line, and you probably would know the answer to this better than I. Is there a scenario where the Supreme Court might possibly review some of these pardons? Do they have the ability or the power? We know that that's a presidential power that exists, the ability to pardon. Is there any scenario where they could rescind any of the pardons that have been granted by President Biden or President Biden's office?
Well, I drove past the Ole Miss Law School a few times, but not a lawyer.
I'm not far from it. I'm certainly not a lawyer.
Yeah. So I'm not going to tell you yes, no, but I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to review any of this. I mean, they are what they are. And they're meaningless because nobody was coming after Benny Thompson about the January 6th committee other than politically. So it's just meaningless. And anyway, Biden has really, he had a bad debate last summer, but I will say the last few months, Biden has just looked really bad. And, here's poor Nancy Pelosi breaks her hip, and the Bidens can't even acknowledge it. It's all pretty pathetic, and because he's mad at Nancy Pelosi because he blames her somehow that he got shoved out of the race. Well, he's got nobody to blame but himself. Anyway, but today shouldn't be about that. Today should be about the country looking forward and the great opportunity that we have to come together as Americans and have a stronger, safer country and stronger, safer world.
Henry, always appreciate your time. Appreciate your kind words about Paul Gallo. Look forward to visiting with you soon. 8 o'clock hour coming up. Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi.